thank you everybody for tuning in. This is Inside Method, and it's going to look a little different than maybe you've seen or heard in the past.
It looks awesome.
It does look good. We're excited. We're building out a little bit of a studio for us to do these kind of interviews with, and we're excited to launch a new series as part of the Inside Method podcast, which is going to be around human development and specifically what the things that Method values as it relates to developing our people internally, and the benefits we think that has on our people and how we work, but also the benefits that ultimately can apply to here with John Tuders and Jose Ruiz, who is visiting us. So we're thankful that you're here. And John, if you don't mind, give us a little background on Jose. I know you guys are close.
No, I appreciate it. And Josh, I appreciate, this series. This is important, right? Method prides itself on looking at the human and the relationship. So excited about the series, excited to kick it off, and very excited about our guest today, Jose Ruiz. So Jose and I go back a couple of decades.
Yes, we do.
And Jose is one of our executives here in Charlotte, right? It's one of our top banking locations here, and Jose's been there and not just been there as an exec, but leading people, and is a big movement over there in development of people. And so no better to have on our first podcast Jose Ruiz join us and talk about one of our favorite topics and concepts that we've been talking about since I've been, in the banking industry around filter quality. So, Jose, let you kind of give a little bit of background for yourself, and then we're going to kick right in.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to participating. Love the studio.
Looks great.
Excited to be part of the inaugural broadcast here. So as you said, I've been in banking for my entire career. Here in Charlotte, I've been in my current organization for over 20 years. So you definitely learn a lot in staying in an organization and growing with an organization over time. My background is really in strategy, data analytics. I've served a lot of different roles: credit risk, product management, business strategy, channels, et cetera, right? So seen a lot. And love opportunities like this, and like you talked about developing talent. I think it's a responsibility that we have to pay it forward. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in New York City. I've been in Charlotte since 1994. Married with two daughters, two beautiful daughters. You know them, Alyssa and Julianne. And big sports fan. Try to stay involved in the community, involved at work in our employee networks. I'm an executive sponsor for one of our employee networks that focuses on the Hispanic associates. And, that gives me the opportunity really to share, develop, and give back to the community. And then recently as well, I've joined a board for a nonprofit here in town. So really looking to kind of give some of my time and some of my experience to that effort as well. So when you approached to join you guys today to talk about this, I was very excited. I know it's a great topic, so thanks for having me.
Well, so that's a great lead in, because I know you touched on it real briefly as far as what specifically we're talking about today, which is filter quality. You made up some stickers for folks that within Method, we have them plastered on our computers. It's what's your FQ? For the folks who are not familiar, this might be a new topic for some of them. What is filter quality? Why is it so important in today's workplace?
Yeah, it's foundationally, it protects your time, right? You mentioned having time to do certain things. The ability to filter. We have events hitting us from every angle, and more so now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And an event can be many things: direct, indirect, emails, texts, social media, you name it. And filter quality gets to the point where those events are going to keep coming. That noise is going to keep coming. And we've always been trained. We spent a lot of time on developing people on how to respond to things. How do you respond so that the outcome will be better? And what filter quality is should you respond at all? And how do you protect your time? How do you protect that big asset of time and energy? And that's the biggest component to it. It's really getting an understanding of everybody's got the same amount of time. Right? That's an asset that's brings equality very fast.
That's right.
The reality is we blow it. And as leaders, the noise is loud. The noise gets louder. There are so many events hitting you. And being able to hear the signal through the noise is a talent, but you've got to focus on it. And so some of the greatest leaders I've seen as I've been moving through my career is they can do that. They can do that, right? The ability to filter through and focus and be mindful. That's what filter quality is. And so, we study a lot on EQ and IQ, and all these things are phenomenally great. They're all very important, RQ. But FQ, it's that concept that says, how do you protect your time, and should you even put an ounce of energy into this?
And I just want to maybe do a little bit of a clarifier here. Is I think it's a common conversation right now in the zeitgeist to be talking about filtering through all of the things that are coming at our attention with social media, with, how easy it is to contact everybody all the time. We're kind of talking about that, but this is a little bit different. We're talking right now, at least at the moment, more specifically around how that plays itself out in the workplace. Right?
It does.
So,
yeah. And the thing is with FQ, if you get better at it, you're going to get better at it in general. It'll help you in the workplace. Yep. It'll completely help you in the workplace, because the reality is we get pulled in a million directions. And the more time you have to focus on the things that you should be responding to, your outcomes at work are going to be better.
That's right.
That muscle memory that you're creating, and you and I have talked about that muscle memory not only gets stronger in that filter, but your confidence grows. And we've talked a lot about confidence.
It's primarily a work thing, right? And that's where
where it stemmed.
Where you have decisions to make that are overt, and you spend a large amount of your time in your day at.
Yeah.
But, filtering that and being effective there and in things you do outside of work just allow you to be more productive, more intentional in all aspects of your life, right? So if I feel I've got balance, if I feel I've got control, then I'm more satisfied. If I'm more satisfied, I can be more effective, right? I can be more focused, more intentional, right? So it definitely, and it's a quality I think is one that you learn over time and you get better at.
You do.
Right? It's not, you can't, some people are naturally kind of more inclined to being able to not overreact. Mm-hmm. But it's about slowing down.
Yeah.
Right? And it's about really seeing the big picture and being intentional about where you spend your time. And you get better at that over time, right? That's something that you can learn, you practice. And I think it's a function of also you get good at where you spend your time, and you not only see what's effective and what works for you, but you also observe instances where folks are not doing it well.
Right.
And you kind of react to that and like, oh, that's not something I want to do because that wasn't effective. Mm-hmm. That wasn't wise. I see the outcome that kind of occurred there. And that's another way to learn and kind of practice and get better at it.
When we first started talking about this a while ago, I think it was an interesting concept for me to start considering because especially, not necessarily, being in a management role, I think a lot of people probably can relate to the idea of when you feel reacting shows in some way that you are asking me to react because that maybe means that I'm important. And so there's this desire, like I must respond, I must react,
right?
Because that shows value.
Oh yeah.
And so, and I think everybody in all positions do that, but I think especially early on in your career,
absolutely,
you're more likely to do that, right? So can you guys expand on, in the article that you wrote, John? I know you referenced kind of here are 5 questions that you can ask yourself when presented with a potential distraction and how you can respond. You guys kind of elaborate on what those are and kind of how those play themselves out.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And Jose had mentioned a piece of it where you get better at over time, and you nailed it, right? Early in your career, there are so many things where you feel like you have to respond to it. I must respond to it. The piece that we're trying to get to is how do you, as early as you can, and even as a reminder later, how do you move the curve up? Because you're going to get better at it because of, time and also incidents, right? Events that happen. But at a younger age, what are those questions? And the piece that we talk about early on in this concept, it was, how do we give them certain questions? How do we help people with what we realize is at the individual level. Everybody's got their own way of going about it. And so the exercises that we do are, here's a few that have been heard from executives all over the place or from workshops as examples, but what's yours? And so for folks, they can feel, okay, I'm at earlier in my career, so my questions would be X. My first question is consider the source. An event happens, consider the source first before I should respond or not. At a younger point in your career, it may be, look, all the sources I'm going to have to respond to, right? So it changes over time. Like your questions that work earlier in your career, maybe later you make an adjustment to it. So that's kind of how we go about it. And it's really given them everybody an examples to say, what are those things in real time or when you have the opportunity to be mindful and pause and really think that can help you filter that. And so we go through those types of questions. Do you have control of this? Do you have any control of this outcome? Right? What's the worst that can happen if I don't respond? Right? Is this one of my top priorities right now? Does this impact someone I care about? That's another one that came from one of our leaders during interviews. She said, it's not just about should I respond, but should I respond because it'll help impact somebody else? So those are the things we go through, and it causes people to create their own filtering system, their own questions that they should go about, because we're all dealing with different stuff. It's not a one size fits all,
Thinking about those questions and stuff, and also where you are in your career. I think when you're early in your career, you're trying to figure out, how you can be effective. And, I think having that filter quality kind of allows you to assess and block out the things where, it might be stretching you, you might not be prioritizing, et cetera. I think as you get further in your career, as I think about it a little bit, the focus might be a little bit on where can I have the most impact?
Yeah.
Right. Good and call. If I'm going to spend my time here, what's the ROI on that? Right. What can I do that somebody else can't do? What can I bring to the table? And I think also kind of along with that, you get the confidence over time to be able to make that assessment and make those choices to say that, right? Where early in your career, you might not have that confidence because you might not be as well established.
Sure.
Or, have as many experiences to be able to know what those outcomes are going to be. But over time, and I think too, as a leader, it helps to set the temperature, right? So when you're filtering things out and you're leading people are always watching you, right? And people are always taking your cue. And you can go into a meeting, you can go into a room, you can go into a forum, and very early, there could be many different outcomes depending on how those interactions begin.
Oh yeah.
Right. And if you're able to go in and be very intentional and, really focus on the things that matter the most and not, hey, we're going to go through these 14 things and we got an hour and we're going to spend 3 minutes on each. No, what are the ones that are most important?
Yeah.
What are the ones that we need to focus on? What are the ones that we're going to ask ourselves when we're done? Did we come to a conclusion? Was that an effective use of time?
Yep.
Right. And really having the ability to focus on that, I think not only makes you more effective, but sets the tone for others as well.
It does.
And you had said earlier, I think, the part that I like is the questions, and just make sure, I just want to clearly state those, and I'll need your help to make sure I'm remembering these properly. But you said consider the source is one. So these are questions that we should be asking ourselves anytime there's something that's pulling our attention.
Yeah.
Whether it's a fire drill or whether it's just a general ask in the workplace. Yep. Consider the source. And then another one would be, what do I need to be the one that's going to do this?
Does it need to be me?
Right.
Should I be the one?
Right.
Yeah. Some of the other ones. So it's, what's the worst that can happen?
Yes.
I think that's a powerful one. Another one is, and you think back, this goes, and it's nothing new to this, right? It goes back to even, the writings in the early 1900s of the Serenity Prayer, the wisdom to know the difference, whether I have control or not. So do I have control of this outcome at all? Another one that I've heard numerous times from folks is, what are the outcomes what are the outcomes if I let this go today? Like what happens tomorrow if I let this go today? And so you start to go through those, but those are some of the ones as examples that we give.
And I think that's a good, we've all been in scenarios, and you guys have a lot more experience than I do and have had much higher profile positions than I have had. So I'm sure it's even worse for you. We've all had positions where other people's problems are now your fires to put out, right? Yeah. And so this is an excellent skill set for us to have when something that's being presented as a fire drill. Yeah. First, let's determine, is it?
Right.
You know, like, and everything you two are describing is really, before we respond, let's hit the pause button.
Let's pause.
Let's evaluate.
Define a problem.
Yeah.
Make sure you're clear.
Is this the time to respond?
Right.
Is there enough information to respond?
Right.
Yeah. You know, Josh, you hit a big part there. And I think, you know, talking to folks even early or even mid part of their career, it is human nature. It is human nature to just help. Yep. It is human nature to help. It is also human nature to take advantage of people that help. And it's not malicious.
Comfort.
Yeah. They know, you know, you're going to get it done. Yeah. The ability, but when I ask people a question, who can protect your time? You.
Nobody but you.
You.
Yeah.
And so this becomes one of those areas where, you know, that may be a fire drill for you, or that may be important for you. But when I look at what's important for me or my team or whatever it is, it's not. So don't make your fire my fire.
Right.
Right. Because all of a sudden we think, oh, we have to do that. And in some cases you do. This is not a black and white answer. But in a lot of cases you don't. And so that's the part I really want to make sure folks have an understanding of. You know, people are like, well, then I feel bad. I remember having a focus group up at one of the companies here in town. It was with a smaller group. And one of the associates said, I'm a people pleaser. When people ask, I want to help. And I said, I love that. That's an incredible trait. And you don't want to lose that. But you have to protect your time, because there are important things that you can be very helpful for. And if you spread yourself so thin, you're not helping anyone.
They're trade-offs.
And those people, there are trade-offs, and those people will burn out, unfortunately, because good people, not maliciously, will take advantage of them. And so you have to protect your time. I have the utmost respect for people who can say no. You know, there's a quote I wrote down so I didn't forget it. You know, it's the art of knowing is knowing what to ignore, right? And because the reality is you have a set amount of time, and you want to put that time to the things that are going to have heavy outcomes, and that you should be the one. One of the pieces I want to hit on, responses are not just physical, verbal, right? Or written. Yeah. Response is anxiety, fear, right? There's those people. Yeah. Anything that's taking time, when you sit there and there's fear or anxiety, or you're eating time. You are responding, but you're emotionally responding. And that's the other thing I want to make sure folks have an understanding of. It's, okay, I didn't do anything, but it lingered with me and I didn't sleep last night. You responded all right. You wasted time, or you used time. That's one piece. The second piece I want to get your take on, is for folks earlier in their career, one of the things that I've realized is, yes, they have to respond probably to more things than later in your career. It just all depends. But one of the things I see a lot is they're responding to things that haven't even happened yet. Right. Events that may happen.
Or things that have happened
in the past.
And you're reacting to it.
Right.
You can't change that outcome.
You can't change it. You're still talking about it.
You can learn from it, but you can't. And it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. You cannot change that. And everybody sees you cannot change the past. You can't. Right. But the reality is we're still responding to things in the rearview mirror. Yeah. And we're still responding. And we're responding to things that may occur in a year. We're going through a tough time right now in the whole, economy, right? There are layoffs, and it's serious. And this is people's livelihoods. But there are a lot of people that keep that, well, what if, and what if, and what if? You're responding and you're wasting time because you can't do anything about it. Going back to one of the questions, can I do anything about it today? I cannot. Let it go.
Yeah.
Right? Any action that I can take right now that would change the outcome from the past? No. Let it go.
Or you look at the big picture and you say, if I'm going to invest any time at this, what am I going to invest time doing?
Right.
So maybe it's not to prevent something or try, but it's how do you prepare for something?
Yeah.
Right. How do you become active in driving the outcome that you want?
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to just being reactive to the stimulus or whatever it is that's coming to you.
Oh yeah. It's a powerful one. You know, the piece you talk about, preparation, is a big one, because there's a fine line between over preparing and worrying, right? There's a fine line. Yeah. You know, the other piece that in conversations that I'll have with folks, especially in a lot of the interviews that we did, we talked a little bit about when an event occurs, really gaining an understanding of the purpose of the event. What was the purpose of the event? And I'll give you a good example of that. When somebody criticizes you, it's an event. The purpose of it is to hurt or just be critical, right, in general. The ability to absorb quickly, and this is why my first question is always consider the source. I quickly consider the sources. And if it's a source I would never want to get advice from, why would I care what would I care about their criticism? And so those things also, it's considering the purpose of it and really understanding that, was it a direct event towards me? And what's the purpose of it? And if it was an indirect towards me, the perfect example is I saw something on social media and I got mad, so I spent the next 4 hours writing back and forth. It wasn't even an event directed at you.
Right.
And the outcome is not going to change.
Right.
So why are you wasting time? So the piece that I always talk to folks about is not just thinking about should I respond or not, but the purpose of it. Was it direct or not direct? Like having that mindfulness and that pause to think through those things, I think it's going to help that filter and the kind of questions you want to pose. So as a leader, you're demonstrating, I'm not listening to noise, because a lot of it is noise.
And you set that tone.
And you set that tone. And you demonstrate the outcome will be the same or better by me not communicating back. And you learn that confidence loop. I remember talking with one of our execs here, and you'll see in the article, she was clear. She said, confidence builds up as you realize your filter was good.
Absolutely.
And you'll screw up sometimes. Like you will filter something and be like, I shouldn't have filtered that. But you learn. Yeah. And your confidence gets better. But that confidence muscle will get better. And it doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter how old you are. It'll get better because you're seeing the outcome is better. Right? Nothing worse than seeing that, I responded to it and the outcome got worse. There's nothing worse than that.
Well, and you'll learn from those mistakes too. And everybody makes them, right? And it's okay to make them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But you got to, or when you get feedback, right? Encourage feedback.
Yes.
People can give you feedback and I don't think you handled that well.
Yep.
Right? Whatever, right? Because feedback's a gift.
It's a gift.
Right?
Don't filter the feedback all the time, though.
No,
right? That's what I mean.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Encourage the feedback.
Yeah, encourage
you want the feedback.
You
can respond to what you want,
right?
But you can encourage the feedback.
Yeah. People are always willing to give you feedback
all the time,
right?
Every day.
Yeah. And you think about, when you were talking about the example of somebody criticizing, right? Maybe your nature, and mentioned earlier from New York, right? So got a little edge on you, right?
No.
A little stereotype maybe, but maybe your instinct is to retaliate.
Sure.
And again, over time, as you kind of see that, learn from that, it's like, was retaliating?
What's the outcome going to be? Better or no?
Was retaliating better? And did I change the outcome? Did I improve it? Right. And you can take things like that and again, translate them to the work environment. Right. And it really helps. And there's, the more you're exposed to at work, the more, you work in teams, you work cross-functionally, you have folks that you lead, you have folks that you influence. The amount of things that come at you are endless.
Oh, it's endless.
Right. And really being able to decide and be intentional on those, it's critical. It's that third leg of the stool.
Well, it is. Yeah. I know you guys are talking specifically, a lot around what, as leaders, what can we do to filter what's coming at us. But I think the byproduct of that is like when we create that as part of the culture, like across all of the teammates, well, then if I'm filtering properly I'm creating less events
Yes.
for
That's great.
for my coworkers,
Great.
for the people
100%.
above me and the people below. So it's when that becomes a cultural norm,
Yeah.
your need for filtering ideally should, it's never going to go away. You're always going to have to do it, but you're you're using it to put out less fire drills.
Yeah.
I would assume
Yes.
would be the ideal outcome, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not just protecting yourself, but the better you become, the more you help protect others.
And it's a productive environment.
It's healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's useful time.
Yeah.
You bring up a huge point, Josh. One of the things and why I like the idea of the 2-letter thing here, because, as you mentioned earlier, those stickers that I have on people's, how's your IQ, how's your FQ, excuse me, that's powerful because it's a very simple way of reminding each other.
That's right.
I'll have folks come in here and they'll, I've heard some of the top execs here would come and they'll say, man, my FQ was good today. Let me tell you why. Or, hey, I had to practice a little FQ and here's why. Or my FQ was bad today and here's why, right? I responded. Right. And to me, that goes a long way. To your point, you're demonstrating it as a community. You're demonstrating it as our time is valuable. We believe here at Method, work-life balance, it's crucial. We demand it. It is that important because we know about well-being. And what better way to have a better work-life balance is when you're protecting the overall time, because the overall time is going to benefit both sides of the equation. And so as a community, holding each other to it and using the term, hey, how's your FQ today?
Yeah.
Because every day, it's not like my IQ is this today and it's a lot lower than the two of you. I know that. You don't have to state it. But for me, my FQ may be better than you today.
Yeah.
But tomorrow it may not be.
Yeah.
And it's getting it to a place where as many in a row as you can get, getting it healthier and healthier, because it is a muscle. I really believe that. It is a muscle. And it's not a laissez-faire, like I don't care. Yeah. It's not an I don't care.
Yeah.
It's I care about the right things.
Yeah. And in listening to you over the last couple of minutes, right? You both brought in an aspect of balance, right? And we've talked a lot about what to do in the workplace and how to manage in the workplace, but that balance is important. And again, I try to learn from every interaction I possibly can. Mm-hmm. When I was coming up, balance was not valued. Your definition of what you did was how many hours you worked and how hard you worked, and were you the last one out of the office? And that's certainly not the case anymore, nor should it be. Right? And that balance is a little bit so. You can master FQ at work, hypothetically, right? If you're not using those same qualities to assess your entire self, right, then you're sub-optimizing and you're really focused on one thing. Because I can say years ago people would ask you how you define yourself, and you define yourself by your job and your profession and what you do, whatever, right? But you start to realize, no, I define myself by I'm a teammate, I'm an executive, I have responsibilities, I have things I need to do. I'm a father. Mm-hmm. I'm a friend. Mm-hmm. I'm a community leader. I'm a teammate on the basketball or softball or whatever, right? And you're more than just who you are at work.
Yeah.
And those experiences help you, and they also help you to be more well-rounded. They help you to be more satisfied. And the more satisfied you are,
bring it,
then the better you're going to be when you go to work or when you go do any one of those things.
Yeah, all connected.
So it's all connected, right? And it's incredibly important, and we want to make sure folks are effective, where they make their careers and where they do that. But it is a skill that permeates everything we do. And the more you have that balance and you're effective, you become more satisfied. If you're satisfied and confident, guess what? You're going to do good things.
You're going to do good things for your employer
and
the
ROI on where you do spend your time is going to be high.
Yeah, it is definitely. Yeah, all connected. I love that you kind of brought that full circle, because it is all connected. And one of the big reasons when Josh and I were talking about kicking off the series, everything we're going to be talking about after this, all the different human development work around relational intelligence and building resilience, all that, you need time. So this is one of those things where we need time to focus on our well-being and the well-being of our teammates and our friends and family. this is going to help start securing some of that time. We don't realize how much responses we have to things that waste our time.
Yeah.
We don't know. And I think until we get into this a little more and you start thinking about it a little more, we've had some great interviews with folks who shut off filters of events, social media, other things to slow down the amount of events. Others that have realized that just on a daily basis, if I'm able to filter one or two things, I'm realizing how much more time I'm getting. Yeah. And then I'm excited because I get to. And the other piece too is it forces you to have prioritization. What is important to you? What is important to you? Is everything important to you? Then nothing's important to you.
That's right.
And so it forces us, by doing this filtering, it's tough to filter not having a foundation of what's important. And I think those are the things. And again, that's an individual level. What's important to me is not the same that's important to you or you. How I filter, the questions I do, where I'm at in my career, how confident I am yet. All those things come. The other part that I've seen in the research is events happen and they keep coming. And then all of a sudden something happens in people's lives that forces your FQ naturally to go up. And those are layoffs, divorces, deaths, so many things that sit there and say, oh my, I just got a reset of how important time is. I just got a reset of what's important to me.
That's right.
And that spikes your FQ naturally. Your FQ gets better. A 95-year-old's FQ is unbelievable. They don't care. I know, ignore. Right. I get focus, right? It's incredible. But how do you get there quicker? And we shouldn't, these events shouldn't be the only way. You have to organically, right, or with purpose, do it so that when the events do happen, it's even going higher than where it was, but you're still making a positive clip. And one of the questions I asked all the interviewers, what would you tell your 24-year-old self when it comes to FQ? And it was like, whew. I would tell them, you ain't that important.
Slow down.
Slow down.
Don't sign up for that Facebook.
Don't sign up for that
Don't
Facebook.
sign up for that Twitter,
yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah.
These days, for
I mean,
sure.
there are so many things you can go back and tell yourself because you know what burnt time.
Yeah.
You know what was a waste. You know, oh, I thought I can solve everything, or I thought I had to jump in the ring for everything. I just want to be in the room when it happened. Mm-hmm. And the reality is those kind of things, and I work with graduate students all the time, and I try to get them early on, is I'm like, you pick this up early, you're ahead of the game. And thinking about this. And the piece that we talk about all the time is there are so many communication channels, right? Communication channels are one way or two way, right? It could be both. There have been so many added and none taken away, right? You have your person to person, you have your email, you have your social media, you have your streams, you have your Slack, I can keep going, right? You can get a hold of anybody anytime. Information come to you whether you want it or not. And that connectedness is all noise, right? Some of it good noise, some of it bad noise, right? It's understanding the signal. But you're right. I mean, it's that attention economy. If the product is free, the product is me, right? It's that attention to it, and everything is clamoring. You can be grabbed and asked things or instructed on things or shock and awe statements coming your way 24/7. And the reality of it is we've become to the point where we're like, well, I guess since it's all coming my way, I then have to reciprocate. And I agree with you. And that's the hard part. And so everybody's got a different way of battling that. Like, I wouldn't sit here with the FQ concept and say, let me tell you how to cut down on social media. Not the take. What I'm saying is there's so much of it. It's going to continue. There's more ways to get a hold of you. Nobody has a home phone anymore. But I can get a hold of you even easier, right?
Easier.
And the email and Slack, I mean, everything. Clients, right?
And then then you're running into I texted you, I called you, I
expectation
emailed
setting.
you, like what's taking so, you're running into that.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole nother thing that 20 years ago wasn't a thing.
They couldn't get you.
And you make decisions, right? And you don't realize it, and we all fall into it. And now just thinking of practical things, right? Used to be when you left work.
You left work.
And maybe you worked a little more when you got home or you thought about it, but you take the call from the car.
Yeah.
You get
Respond.
the text, and you're driving and you're reacting to it. Not wise, right? You would tell your kids not to do that,
Right.
But we do it,
That we do it. And
right? You're trying to go to
you
sleep,
nailed it.
and a notification comes on your phone,
And you respond.
and you respond. Ding,
Yeah.
lights are off.
Yeah.
Ding, and then all of a sudden you see the ambient light go on because you're
Yeah.
responding to it. No, you're sleeping.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah. And you set a precedence, you know, when
100%.
we're responding at, you know, protected sacred times,
Used to be protected sacred
Right.
time. You have to maintain.
you
it.
have to maintain it. And that goes back to you and only you
Control it.
can control it. And again, the part that I always harp on is nobody, most nobody is trying to be malicious, but they will take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And you, the moment you set the precedence. Now, I've heard people, well, if I don't respond to my client or my boss by this, that set the precedent.
And I think the other piece of that too is, and this kind of goes into your point of it's not malicious most of the time, which is because of the world. You know, even just 3 years ago, from 3 years ago,
Sure.
the world has shifted dramatically.
100%.
And so you have people who, hey, you know what? I've got so much flexibility. For whatever reason, it makes sense for me to start my day at 11 and finish it at 9.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That's probably not the case for somebody else that you're
Right.
messaging
That's right.
at
That's
8
right.
o'clock
Right.
That's right.
at night, right?
That's right.
And so for you, it's probably, well, they'll get to it when they get to it. But for somebody else receiving that, it's like, well, do I need
gotta
to respond to
respond.
this?
Yeah.
Do I not? You know, and so setting up those clear boundaries sometimes, like we've had some of those conversations at work where, hey, do you need me to reply to these when these come? Right. Oh, no, I don't. That's just when I'm on.
Right.
Like I don't, you know, and so those are good. I think
Setting the tone. Look,
Yeah.
you don't need to reply to this now. I just want, like, setting, to your point earlier of community, being respectful and setting the tone. My expectation is that you not respond to this now. Those are the things that a good leader is going to be able to do and people can respond to.
And that's right. You could be intentional about that. And I try to be as mindful about that. Hey, when you get a moment.
Right. Right.
Hey, no need to respond now. This is not a fire drill.
Right.
Right. And then reinforce. It's like there will be times when through my own FQ or through circumstances, whatever, it might be a fire drill because they happen. Right. And at that point in time, we will rally.
Oh, yeah.
And we will deliver, right? Because that's where we need to make an impact.
That's right.
You know what I love about this is when you've set the expectation of what the cultural norm as it relates to FQ is, when that's adopted, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, it's a weekend and the crap has hit the fan. I need all hands on deck. When that happens, the few times that happens here, and so that comes up, my response is absolutely.
Let's go.
Why wouldn't I?
Right.
Because I know that it's an emergency, or else you wouldn't
hasn't
be
been
asking
watered
me.
down.
And
Yeah.
you've respected my time.
Yeah.
Every other time, so I know that it's needed now. You've got what you need from me. Let's go.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's a huge thing, especially when it comes to culture. The other piece that, you know, we talk about here a lot of Method is a lot of our clients have different cultures. We have Method's culture. It doesn't mean you don't understand your client's culture and adapt accordingly, but we're not going to change who we are. That's why people come here. That's why people stay here. And so we're not going to change that. And that's protecting. That's protecting at the individual level. And it's having that, you know, bringing that psychological safety to your teammates so that they understand it's applauded and protected, right? Yeah. The other piece in conversations, and you think about extending yourself too much, and I've said this since managing folks at different large companies, is the hardest job in the world that I've seen is an executive working mother. It's the hardest job in the world.
100%.
You never feel like you're doing an incredible job on either end of the equation. And I say that because when some of the folks that I work with, whether it's clients of mine or students or folks in the office, it's, man, I get pulled in so many directions. And when you start having the conversation of, man, your time is so valuable because of that hardest role I know, you're still saying yes to PTA or other things or involvement in, you know, whatever it is, your time is even more precious.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say no. Like getting people to the point of understanding you're not putting your worst mask on when you say no. You're actually doing a service to the people that matter the most. And really being okay with the saying no when people need help, or if you're a good leader, people are going to want your time.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation where you're already pulled from many angles, people don't really care about that. They still want your time. And if you give it, right, they're going to take it. So that's one of the other areas that, outside of responses to whether email or communications or whatever it is, it's when people are trying to take time of, your involvement or your help. Those things as well, you have time to respond. It's not a real time thing in most cases, but you have to sit back and say, if filtering is going to be a big part of what I respond to, part of my response is you're not going to have me, not just my response, me, because me as part of the response physically is that. And so I bring that up because in talking with the interviews, those came up a lot.
Yeah.
Those came up a ton.
Josh, earlier you were talking about, when you can get pulled into so many different places and you think that the value you're adding is by being in all the places, right? And then John, you mentioned about being in the room,
yeah,
right, and wanting to be in the room, but you don't need to be in every room,
Mm-mm.
right? And if you're in every room, you'll go back and if you reflect, you're like, I didn't need to be in a few of these. And as you're able to filter, and some age-old kind of adages, right? It's quality and not quantity,
yeah,
right? And I've had a colleague at work that I admire quite a bit, and he would always caution folks like, hey, let's stay focused and let's not have a bunch of half-built tree forts, right? Because then you don't accomplish anything,
yeah,
right? And if you're able to really focus on making the decisions that this is where you're going to spend your time and you're mindful about that, that's where you're going to have an impact. The other thing that comes with that is a tremendous amount of credibility. Right. And that credibility is incredibly important to be able to, again, set the tone, help to foster that culture that we were talking about. Right. It's like, okay. And you Josh talked about as well, like when folks are respectful of your time, when they call on you, you take that into consideration. You're like, okay, there must be a need here. Same thing comes with credibility. If this is something they're looking to do, they're looking to deliver, it must be something important.
yeah,
Right. And I can count on them to deliver that because that's important. And again, it becomes a little bit infectious, I think.
oh yeah,
Right.
Sure.
And that credibility is an asset or, something that has a tremendous amount of value. Right. And helps to deliver into that culture and that tone that you can set.
I'm curious your thoughts because I think you and I have talked about this a time or two, John. But I'm curious, Jose, what your thoughts are as it relates to you're saying early on a lot of folks, and I was one of these people as well, where it's like I want to be in there because that means that I'm important, or it means that maybe somebody sees me as important.
That's right.
That's
right. Yeah.
And that's the constant thing. And then I think the second piece of that puzzle, and this may be a little bit more tied to personality types, myself being one of them, is I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, well, now that I'm here, I must speak, I must engage because now that shows the next step of like I'm bringing something to the table. When oftentimes it's like you can still be credible. You can still bring value. It doesn't mean that you have to do all the talking or that you have to talk at all. Right?
That's right.
I'm curious if you've seen that or play out, or if you have any thoughts on
100%. You see it all the time, right? And you see the diversity in people's approaches, right? And you absolutely can tell the folks that feel a need to always be heard, right? And that's their objective. Some people do it because they think it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Other folks do it for the wrong reasons and think that if I always have something to say, then I'm establishing myself. And,
and what did we say earlier? A wise man once said, nothing at all.
Nothing at all. Right. And when you, so I have low tolerance and patience for mediocrity. and I've learned over time and to listen, right? And the nuggets can come from anywhere in the organization. It can come from the guy who just walked through the door yesterday, right? Because they're seeing it with fresh eyes, et cetera. But when you sit back and you really evaluate, oftentimes it's those folks that are very intentional about what they say, when they say it, that really make an impact and give you something to reflect on. And, I think over time you learn again that it's the quality and not the quantity.
I hope I'm not mixing this up, but I'm pretty confident it was you when you I was listening to a conversation you were having at one point, and you were talking about how oftentimes the filtering through the noise of the people who are doing that is important, because oftentimes they're talking just to talk.
Right.
But the people who are actually bringing value oftentimes are the ones who might be too scared to speak up,
right.
and making sure that they have a platform, or you're encouraging them as a leader to share what are you thinking? Because sometimes they need that pride out of them, because these people will steamroll them.
Yeah.
If that's all, if nobody's ever actually making sure that you're given that platform.
Yeah. And understand, no doubt, 100%, right? And understanding your environment allows you to think on your feet and figure out when you want to be heard and how you want to handle a situation. And again, a lot of that I think comes with experience. Sometimes you may just listen and ingest everything, and then when you choose to speak or how you interact might be after the meeting, right? It might be after the event. You might say, in summary, this is what I heard. Or I might say, walking away from the meeting, going to wherever we're going, hey Josh, what do you interpret when you heard this? Or what are your thoughts on what Jane said, or what Michael said, or what Michelle said? And how can we take that and build off of that, right? And so oftentimes it's not even what happens at the moment. It's not about being heard. It's about adding that value. And like John said, sometimes it's being quiet. Sometimes it's being very intentional. Sometimes too, I do think there are situations where you have to be fluid. You have to know how to react in each situation. Some people innately, I think, want to be led, right? And sometimes when there's a blank slate, sometimes you need to be the one to stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to get this started. I'm going to go to the drawing board. I'm going to grab the marker and I'm going to go. But then have the mindfulness to say, when you're ready and you're contributing, I give you the marker.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And now you contribute, and now you take it and you build off of what I started,
right,
and kind of go there. And those I think are the most effective things. But when people are keeping score for the wrong reasons and being intentional about the wrong thing, right? How many words do I say? When do I say it? Am I being, and again, I think that you start off with thinking that that's the formula for success.
Yeah.
Right. But, I think you learn over time it's not.
Yeah.
Right. Or it's not always. Right.
Yeah.
So like we started off with, right. It's you get better at it. You learn.
Yeah.
And you learn what to do, and you learn from experience to see also what not to do. Right. And you take all those things into an arsenal. And I'm a big believer in every situation is an opportunity to learn.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And those are wonderful examples. Right.
Yeah.
You always need to be that sponge. So.
Yeah. There was a class last night. We were talking about a couple of things in the grad class, and I brought up the Kenny Rogers song, Gambler, which not everybody listen to the podcast will know.
Love it.
But if you haven't listened to it yet, you should listen to it.
You like the original or the remix with Wyclef?
I like both.
I like both.
I like the original. But a lot of, the messages there is, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. And I think in a lot of cases that's an art. And I think the only way, because silence is a form of communication. And I think in a lot of cases, we don't believe silence is good. Some people feel awkward. The reality is, and I read this incredible piece of advice, and it talked about when you're in real time and you're being criticized, or somebody's taken a jab, or somebody has, put you in kind of a shock and awe on your heels. You wait 10 seconds to respond. And those 10 seconds, psychologically, the person who said it has to listen to themselves say it a couple of times
That's right.
before you respond.
Or realize what
They realize what they're
said.
saying.
Yeah.
And that silence demonstrates a ton of control, a ton of patience, the pause button. Because then you're thinking, okay, know when to walk away, know when to run, know when to fold them, all those things. You sit there and say, does this deserve a response? Silence is universal. And I think if people can get comfortable with it, even though it may not be a norm because of the background, I think it's an extremely powerful thing.
Yeah.
And I think people fill space with response or with irrational, quick. Your first irrational response, I got to put money on the table and say it's not going to be a good one, especially if it's a negative hit to you, right? Negative event that comes your way. And so that pause button, I think, builds that out. And it could be in a meeting setting. It could be emails coming your way, Slack messages coming your way, a meeting invite, right? It could be a lot of different things. We're living in a world of Zoom and remote and hybrid environments. Silence is extremely powerful, extremely powerful. Nonverbal cues are responses. We forget that.
What advice would you give to somebody, like me, for example, when we first started talking about this, and this is you're the first one to say this, John, which is FQ is not a license for you just to ignore everybody.
That's correct.
That's right.
Because that's just being an asshole.
That's right. That's right.
So there's times where that's appropriate,
Yeah.
and then there's other times where, like, it does warrant a response. Let's figure out the right response. But what would your advice be to somebody early on who's hearing this, who might say, what is going to be the interpretation on the other end when I don't respond?
Right.
Because if the response is, this doesn't deserve a response.
Right.
But the other person may not see it that way. So now it's like, now did I just create another event that I'm going to have to filter?
Yeah, I'd break it down, right? So the events that are not directed at you, those are easy because nobody's expecting you to respond, right? Yeah. So you not responding saves you time and doesn't impact anybody. The events that are directed towards you, right? The events that are directed towards you, your not response is going to go one of two ways. I think there are some folks that are going to question it and be annoyed by it, potentially. I think the second part is going to be they're going to realize their event wasn't worth your time.
It's going to ring loud.
It's going to ring loud.
Mm-hmm.
And
or I think the other thing that, and I'm sorry if you maybe we're going to say this, I think sometimes your silence forces them into another solution.
Yes.
And so then, okay, well.
You nailed it. A lot of times events will solve themselves, right? Events will solve themselves, or the right person responded. Sometimes we don't give the right person a chance to respond because we are the hero with a cape on. And we probably could get it done. There's a lot of people that can get things done, but let the right person do it. Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things. And I do believe there's enough of the others that don't have that negative impact potentially if somebody's waiting for a response that we can start with, that if people are starting out, there's a lot of filtering that can go on that wouldn't have that direct. But I think as that confidence muscle builds from doing the other filtering, you're going to know when to hold them, when to fold them.
It takes
a lot.
It takes a lot of confidence
to not respond. It does.
And it sends a strong
message. And in some cases, Josh, I do believe, if the ones that aren't directed at you, that should be your first ones. The ones that are, directed at you that somebody else can, or what's the worst case, right? Or it's not part of your purpose, right? It's not part of your priorities. Those are the easy ones. The ones where it's a critic or a demand or a negative thing coming at you and you don't respond, one, it's going to feel uncomfortable. Two, there's going to be a percentage of them that you're going to learn and say, okay, I probably should respond to that. And you learn from it. But there's going to be some loud ones and it's going to go over well for you. And those are the ones where you're saying, my time is important. I don't care about the criticism because I'm considering the source here. And if I don't go for you again for advice, I'm not going to worry. Or that's not mine to bear. right? Those are the ones that are going to be loud, and some of them may sting a bit. That wouldn't be the first ones I would go after in filtering, but you're going to build the confidence up to be able to do that. And I think people would be shocked about how powerful and secure and confident you show. Your time is precious. Your energy is precious, and you own it. As much as you think maybe you don't, there are portions of it that you're just giving away. And so I do believe there are things that'll be easier to filter on.
And I think, well, with this specific subject within filter quality, but I think sometimes with this, it can be easy to lose sight of the end goal of like why ultimately we're saying this is important. And it's not necessarily, I just want to clarify for folks who maybe, hopefully folks haven't got distracted by the idea that this is not just to make your day easier.
No.
At the end of it all, this is ultimately so that you can optimize your time and be most efficient for the company that you're helping to work with.
That's right.
100%.
You don't have a lot of time. You're sleeping 8, right? You're working at 8+. You're up the other 8 maybe. The reality is you don't have a lot of time. And you're right, Josh. It's optimizing your time. Method wants you to optimize time. Our clients want you to optimize time. Your friends, your family, right? So many things. You optimize the time. You're getting what the best you can give. And the big thing with the filter quality is we learn so many ways how to do things, how to respond to things. We just really never focus on, especially with the noise getting louder. It's getting louder. We're connected. We mentioned earlier how long we're connected. It's not going to slow down. If we think that's going to slow down, we're crazy. That attention economy will continue. And so how do you optimize your time on the right purpose, for the right people, for the right tasks, for things that you will have a positive impact on, that you can affect the outcome? Stop being heroes, right? All those things come to it. And those are the learnings I want folks to grab. And again, nobody should go out tomorrow and just filter everything out, right? The reality is it happens little by little, and you get better at it. You'll change your questions up a little bit, right? Of what you should ask, what makes most sense.
You said stop being heroes, right? That's a common thing that I think about sometimes, right? Because you can jump in and you're capable and you're able, right? And sometimes you have colleagues that you can partner with or deploy to do some of these things, but it's not being effective, right?
For no one.
We say being Superman does not work, and usually there's only downside and no real upside.
No real upside.
Especially if you do it on a regular basis. Yeah. And like we've talked about, earlier, like if you're known for that, then folks kind of take that for granted.
They do. And not maliciously, but they do.
And they get trained to do that, right?
That's right.
And then again, so they feel, oh, you're going to deliver. Well, chances are somebody else in that equation that's not delivering.
Right.
Right. That should be the subject matter expert or the one that's accountable or whatever. And then there's only downside.
Yeah.
Right. Because you deliver. Yeah. And when something doesn't go exactly right, oh man, Jose screwed that up.
Yeah.
Or the flip side of that would be, an example of this just happened to us not too long ago in the company was, hey, can you take care of this? Because I know the person could, and it would be done immediately. And the response was, I could, but if I do it, it's going to mean that I took the role away from the other person.
That's right.
Who should be doing it. And not in a sense of why aren't they doing it, but I as a leader who supersedes them don't want to take away from giving them an opportunity
development
to be in
opportunity.
The spotlight,
yeah,
right?
to deliver, absolutely, to get those experiences.
The one piece I wanted to kind of close with and get some last thoughts is if you start with this, you can only filter in the present moment. Right. Let's start with thinking about the events that happened in the past. This is an easy one, right? As quick as you can get to it. Now, how you do it, that's the next step.
Yep.
The events that haven't occurred yet at all, right? So living in the present moment, that's where I want us to focus, because that's where your first major activities are going to come from. So as a reminder, think about the events that have happened. We've gone through so many different examples of them, direct and indirect and such, over the last week or so. Think about those events, list them out, write them down, 5 or 10 of them, and then go through some of the questions we've talked about, considering the source. Am I the right one? Does it need to be responded to now? What's the worst case scenario? Will this, what will happen to this if I do, right? There are so many, is this tied to my purpose? Mm-hmm. Is this happening in the future? Is this happening in the past, right? Mm-hmm. Go through those questions. Think of yours, 1, 2, 3, whatever they are. And then put those questions to each one of those events and make a call. Would I have filtered this with these questions? And if all of them you say, no, I wouldn't have filtered them, I understand. Think about different questions, right? There are opportunities to filter. And you got to be honest, right? You got to be honest with yourself. I would say don't go into it with, I'm going to filter out 50% of the events. That's not realistic. It's not realistic. But I would say if there's a couple, you just optimize your day a little better. And the biggest reason is so that you can put your energy and your time on the responses that matter because the outcomes are important to you.
That's right.
And those are the parts to grab. And so those are the pieces that I wanted to really end with in this series and give folks that opportunity to think through. Jose, any last?
No, I mean, and every time we have discussions around this, formally, informally, a light bulb goes off. And I think of something, I learned something, I'm intrigued by a comment. So, what you just challenged everybody that's listening with, I think is wise and practical. And, if you've listened to what we've talked about and take anything from it, you can start immediately to really assess, how you're doing with your FQ.
Yeah.
And where you have opportunities to sharpen that skill set and make better decisions on where you spend your time.
Yeah.
Like you can start
right
immediately.
Away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And every day, just ask yourself, how's my FQ today?
Yeah.
Right. Powerful.